Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Dojo Live. I'm Tulio Surgusa, broadcasting from Southern California. And today is Thursday, December 10th, 2020. It's the evening of Hanukkah. Welcome back. And I am joined by my co-host, Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Hi,
Thank
Carlos.
you. Hi, Tulio.
I love the shirt. I make the magic. We are celebrating our team building week. We're doing a virtual team building week, so we're wearing these t-shirts. I don't have mine on, but I will tomorrow. John, our guest, John Sabey. Of course, this is why we do all this. John is with ProSep, and we are excited to speak with you about innovation in oil and gas. Obviously, an interesting topic, sometimes controversial topic today, but I like the conversation we're going to have today specifically around innovation and potential renewable energy or green energy. So, but before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit, John. Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm John Sabey, CTO here at ProSep, and I have been in the oil and gas industry for 35 years, about 35 years. So I'm a bit of a gray hair. I guess the high points of my career have always been on frontline technology development and implementation into the industry. And that's what I hope to cover today. I've worked for Baker Hughes back at the beginning of my career, a Norwegian company known as Kverner, which is now Aker, and which was then bought by NOV, so everything is dynamic in our industry. And then in 2005, there were four of us that started ProSep, primarily with our know-how and experience in the industry, and pulled together gas treating, water treating, and crude treating, and formed ProSep. And then we built our team from there, and we've had a number of adjustments and corrections to meet the current market conditions.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you. Tell us a bit about ProSep. What do you guys do?
Okay. So as I mentioned, we were formed in 2005. We offered primarily conventional upstream technologies. So upstream is the sector from the wellhead to the pipeline before it goes to the processing plants. And when these fluids are produced and come up, they are typically commingled. You have gas, you have the crude oil, and you have water. And our portfolio of products helped to separate those and purify them so that there was less separation or less waste downstream that then had to be handled. And that kind of got us going. We entered in 2005. It was a great time in the industry. We saw our company grow from nothing to about 40 million in revenue in 3 years, with about 6 million in profits. Then we've had a number of downturns in the oil and gas since then. And most recently, the one in 2014, where we ended up restructuring the company. And now we're focused primarily on proprietary technologies. We've got two branches, one treating water. We've got 3 different products that basically polish, remove the very last bit of hydrocarbons or contaminants out of the water stream. And then we have a proprietary line of mixers that were used for upstream, midstream, and downstream processing.
Interesting. All right, let's go right into the topic today so we could dig in a little bit more. Carlos, please introduce the show with the topic.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Tulio. And thank you, John, for joining us today. So, Tulio, today we're going to be speaking about innovation. In other words, we're going to be talking about driving advancements in oil and gas processing. Okay, when I was first having I had an initial conversation with John. We discussed the innovation in drilling and shale development transform U.S. oil and gas production. So we're going to be answering the question, will the oil and gas processing sector follow suit, providing critical advancements in operational efficiencies to sustain the industry under fire from renewables and green energy? That's okay. With that being said, John, please tell us why you chose this particular topic and why you thought it was relevant for this day and age.
Okay, Carlos, further to our initial conversation and in learning about what Dojo Live is doing, primarily on new technologies because of the California base centered around software or internet IT development. And I explained that I wasn't really involved in that sector, but more on the upfront, making those changes happen so that the data that is now being collected, and a lot of oil and gas companies are going to the Internet of Things, IoT, digitalization, for a variety of reasons. One, manpower is your most costly expense, typically, and in order to meet margins that have been whittled away due to the low oil price as well as cost of development of new fields, that needs to be optimized. And so a lot of companies have integrated digitalization of their facilities where they're collecting all this data on how the facility is run so that they can automate it and maintain peak performance. We've taken the same approach, and I should say, certainly that has been emphasized this year with the situation with COVID, where we don't want to have a lot of interaction with others. And in order to minimize those exposures, if we can do things remotely in terms of controlling facilities or optimizing them or operating them even, that's best for everyone's health and safe being. From a process perspective, we believe that there are technologies, Stokes' law, which has to do with gravity separating, has been a fundamental in the industry in terms of designing equipment or processes for much, much longer than I've been around. But there are certain technologies where we've looked at processing, and my whole career has been in this. Way back beginning of my career, I looked at new technologies for treating produced water. And then most recently with the portfolio ProSep has, we've had a number of clients call us and say, hey, this refinery shut down and I have to, they used to take our condensate from a gas plant. They take the condensate to refine that into different product streams. And they came to us and said, we now need to find a place to put this back into our gas stream. And one of our injection mixing technologies has been able to do that. And the interesting thing is the oil and gas industry, I think more so than most others, is very, very conservative in looking at new and innovative, novel developments. Everybody wants to be serial number 2, not serial number 1. And so it's a bit of an entry issue. But in this particular case, they had looked at other solutions, and none of them were able to solve their problem. And this was so critical to their operation that they actually paid for us to run a test at Southwest Research Institute, which is a facility in San Antonio, where we can do a flow loop, and we basically run fluids in a closed loop and study how they behave. And based on the success of that, the company moved ahead with the technology. As a result of that study, we ended up making a couple modifications. I think during one of our initial conversations, we talked about 2 new patents that we've developed out of this particular effort to improve the technology. And the technology has been since installed and has been operating for over a year with great success. And so I think, from my perspective, if we can get entry into the market opportunities that are out there, that if these oil and gas companies will take that risk, and it is a substantial risk, I don't want to downplay that, but I think particularly now with the environment that we're in, where everybody wants to go to green energy, renewable energy. I think there's been about a dozen refineries in the U.S. that have closed down due to lack of demand, particularly for fuels, and have converted over to biodiesel plants. And so in order to sustain the industry and to be able to give a return to shareholders, both employees as well as investors, the industry needs to maintain a profit margin. And we think that our technology will help them operate better, more efficiently, and accomplish those goals.
Thank you, John. And I'm sorry, Tulio, I just want to add something. Yeah. I was listening to John, and I think, first of all, thank you, John, for elaborating. And I remember that at the beginning of the conversation and in our previous conversation too, well, you kind of made it, kind of differentiated the fact that we, as a show and as show sponsor, we're a software company, a technology company, and then you kind of differentiated you and yourself and your whole industry, your whole space as something that's being not somehow not exactly, you were not completely into it. And to my, what I wanted to say is, actually, it's the contrary, because it amplifies the concept of technology. What you're saying, your experience in these fields, in the oil field and the gas field, and everything that you're doing, because of your tenure and your experience, I think what you have to say amplifies the technology part. Because to me, and this is something that I was reading this morning about, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what technology entails. And you usually hear technology and we think of in terms of code and just, computer screens or, digital gadgets.
Devices, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just about that. So what you bring to the table with your experience, I think it amplifies the concept, from my standpoint, the concept of technology. So, and it adds to it. And I think in a very desirable and necessary manner, especially because of the environmentally sensitive aspects of fossil fuels and things like that. So, right. Yeah, I think it's great what you're about to elaborate on further. So, with that being said, I just wanted to mention that because I look forward to what you have to say. So, please, Tuli, I'm sorry to got carried away, but I know you got a bunch. Go ahead.
We're having a conversation. I'm just curious to learn, because as you develop technology for cleaner, more efficient production, right? So it's about removing wastage and reducing chemical and even carbon output, right?
Right.
So this innovation, this technology, how are you getting to that? How is that research coming into play? Are you using AI to figure out different models? How is that coming about today? And second, I noticed that you also apply this technology for clean water. So what are some of the longer term uses of innovation that could come out of trying to help the oil and gas industry be cleaner, be more efficient? What impact does that have in other areas, such as clean water, for example?
Okay, that's great. I'm going to start with the first half, if I can, about the technology development. So as I mentioned, we have this product that injects fluids into process streams, and we found that it does a much better job of mixing. And through that enhanced mixing efficiency, we've been able to lower the amount of chemicals that have been required. We've been able to lower the amount of additives that need to be added into the process. So that adds to chemical savings and less chemicals into the environment. One of the things that we did on this particular project that I was just talking about is we've had this installed in upstream oil and gas applications. The inquiry that came to us was for the feed gas going into an LNG facility. And I trust you guys are aware that those investments are billions of dollars. And so they are very, very cautious to what they put in terms of treating the gas coming to their facility to protect that investment. And so one of the things that they mandated is that they wanted us to do this flow loop test, which we did, proved to be successful. We were able to identify a couple areas that were of concern to the client that we were able to resolve through development. But in terms of using I's and O's or zeros and ones to help push that along, we ended up doing a lot of CFD. And CFD stands for computational fluid dynamics. when it first came into play, it was known as cartoons for directors. And what you could do is you could create these pretty pictures, and basically it's a computational study of fluid dynamics. And it models what's going on inside equipment based on the pressure, temperature, flow rates, densities, etc. I'm not a CFD expert, but through that, we were able to demonstrate what was going on inside the equipment and why we were seeing these efficiency gains. We then ended up modeling a whole host of different process conditions, flow rates, pressures, temperatures in the system to be able to give the client confidence that the solution that we were proposing to put forward to solve this issue was going to work across all the operational conditions that they were going to be operating under. And as I mentioned, we're a year into operation. There's 6 units out there on 3 different pipelines. And we have to call them to see, to get data to see how it's working. So in terms of that, it's been a real advancement, not only for, I think, our understanding of the technology, but also insight into how these things actually are working. We have lots of physics equations that we use, but this validated it and matched up with what we're seeing in the full scale facility.
So, John, just for understanding, I'm not an oil and gas expert, and I'm sure there's those listening who are trying to sort of, speaking of picture, trying to visualize where this fits in. So just just go with me and correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So there's the drilling, right?
Right.
That extracts the oil.
Right.
Then I'm assuming that gets put into some kind of a containment, right? And
Right.
then it gets distributed through pipelines and gets refined, right?
Correct.
And then through the refining, it goes back to some kind of containment that gets delivered to wherever it needs to be delivered, right? Whether it's by truck or a tank or what have you.
Correct.
So where do you guys play in that ecosystem?
Well, it's a great question, Tulio. To be honest with you, we have found application in all 3 sectors. Upstream is basically from the pipeline to that from the wellhead to that pipeline where the production is transported for further processing. So there's separation in that. And in terms of saving chemicals, that's where we've seen the biggest benefit. Once we do that initial separation and we send the products for further processing or separation into, say, gasoline or jet fuel or ethylene for plastics manufacturing, we found applications there. And for the crude treating, where it goes into a refinery and it's changes into diesel and kerosene and your fuel products, we found application there as well. So in terms of oil and gas production and processing, it spans the whole gamut, to be honest with you.
Wow. Okay. So, and the intent of all this is to reduce what exactly?
Reduce chemicals. We found that we could
which impacts what? Is that a pollution thing, or is that a cost benefit? What is the
both? Okay. It's a pollution thing. It's a cost thing. Obviously, they're not getting these chemicals for free. So the less they use, the less they have to spend, and the less chemical that may find its way into the environment. And so through that, we can reduce that. We've also found that our devices are much more effective using less energy to mix these 2 fluids together. And so we're getting a lower, it's called pressure drop. That's the energy that does the mixing. And through our devices, we are getting by with a lower pressure drop with the same efficiency or better efficiency, higher efficiency in terms of mixing. So we're reducing the amount of electricity that's used, thereby reducing the amount of fuel that is required to be burned to create the electricity and reducing CO2, and it's a knock-on effect, to be honest with you.
Okay, so this is great, reducing emission, reducing inefficiency in the oil and gas space, but you guys also help with treatment of water. Talk to us about that.
Right. And so we've got 3 different products, all are for polishing. So I mentioned Stokes' law before. Typically what we'll do is the wellhead fluids will be produced, will go into a big separator, and then they separate by gravity. Just like your oil and vinegar dressing, you got to shake it up to get a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of oil. Otherwise, you get all oil or all vinegar at once. And so what we do is we allow this to gravity separate. Then what we'll do is we'll take the water off the bottom of that separator because it's the heaviest element. It goes to the bottom. And there will be residual solids, maybe some production sand in that, and some hydrocarbons. And we want to separate that so that we can then have a clean water stream at the end. We go through further gravity separation. We go through typically a flotation where we put air bubbles in there to make those, to attach to those oil droplets, cause them to be more buoyant, to float out of the water. And then we typically will do a third stage or tertiary treating where we either filter it, coalesce it, or do a solvent extraction or an absorption to take those residual hydrocarbons out. And we have a product for each one of those. The one I would like to highlight today is called Osorb. It's a new technology. It was discovered in a lab in Worcester, Ohio, as part of a DOE project to create a substance that would help authorities identify explosives in airports or city buildings or whatnot. And in the development of that, they found that this particular material had a great attraction for hydrocarbons of all different sorts. And our parent investor, Energy Ventures out of Norway, started the company for the oil and gas industry. It was known as PWA, Produced Water Absorbents, which then joined with ProSep and is now marketed under the ProSep banner. And it will remove hydrocarbons that typically cannot be removed by any other method. It's an absorption, and because it's a physical type of absorption, we can reverse it. So when we load this media up with these trace hydrocarbons, and we can get down to ppb levels, we remove benzenes and other toxic elements. So again, in terms of HFC, this is a great innovation in the industry for this water treatment. And then once it gets loaded up, we can reverse that, either put heat in or another, what we call a displacement fluid, to reverse that, pull all those contaminants off, and then restart the process. So it's a cyclical process. It's kind of a batch. And so we'll have several vessels lined up, load one up. When it gets loaded up, we go to the next one. The one that's loaded up, we'll end up regenerating it. Then it's on standby. And again, we go around in the carousel type method. And it's seen application in offshore production, primarily where they're treating to remove basically harmful components, environmentally harmful components from the produced water that other technologies do not remove.
So I got a question. I'm sorry. Yeah, two questions. Earlier on in the conversation, John, you mentioned that there was the data was important. So would you say that ProSep is labeled or considered a data-driven enterprise? That's the first question.
We are getting there, but that's not what our primary development effort is. We are working with some companies that are specialists in that to be able to monitor the performance of our equipment better. I was on a panel a week ago about digitalization efforts, and when they came around to me and they asked me, well, what have you gotten out of this? I said, well, I'm not an IT guy. I'm not a software guy. So, but we are looking at how can we utilize those tools that you guys are developing, big data and, Internet of Things, to be able to capture what we need to capture so that we can give feedback to the operator or the oil and gas company regarding the performance, and that we are meeting the specifications that they're asking for on a continuous basis.
Okay, thank you, John, for elaborating on that. The second question that I have is in your role, you're at the company's CTO. So I'm for those who are watching and might be interested in the subject, and especially with those who are interested in the environmental impact of these activities. I'm interested in asking you what sort of maybe how can I say this, environmental restoration initiatives that exist could be in place. Is there anything of this nature implemented already at ProSep? And if so, how's it being managed? How is it? Do you get other people involved, like, I don't know, project managers? How does it all work out in the end to just make sure?
Those are great questions. Certainly, in terms of the environmental impact, we are working with the operators as they utilize our equipment to clean up their process streams. And some of the reasons we've gotten projects are specifically due to the fact that we are making a smaller environmental impact. One of the other water technologies that we have is what's known as Sea-Tour. It's named after a French chemist who discovered the concept that some hydrocarbons will basically capture or extract other hydrocarbons through a solubility process. And this was developed in Norway, where there's a lot of fishing. There's not a lot of farming because it's cold.
Right.
And their environmental concerns are extremely high, probably some of the highest in the world in terms of maintaining their environment. And this technology was developed specifically to do a solvent extraction of these hydrocarbon components that were not able to be removed with other more conventional technologies. And one of the criteria by which they measure their performance is known as the environmental impact factor. And that, along with the Sea-Tour process and with the Osorb media, or OMS as we call it, Osorb media systems, both help companies comply with environmental discharge.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it. That helped a lot.
Okay.
So John, what I'm appreciating is the reminder that technology isn't just software and
Right.
computers and hardware. At least the space in the world that we live in, it's easy to forget that there's also electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and a chemical engineering, that
Right.
there's technology innovation behind those initiatives. So speaking of that, in terms of how you go about attracting the right people to bring in new ideas and innovation in a world that's very bent on just software, right? How do you get people involved? You're seeing people taking an interest in these pursuits because basically you're doing something that's good for the environment, or at least trying to reduce the impact that these activities have on the environment.
Right.
So are you getting interest from people, and where are you getting folks to come work with you?
Well, that's a great question. One of my roles as CTO and as the gray hair is to mentor our younger employees. We're a small company. There's only 14, 15 of us, I think, globally. Most of us are here in Houston. And so what we found is those employees that are attracted to ProSep, number one is the empowerment that we give them. Because we're a small company, there's nothing we don't let, you can do whatever you want to, more or less, in terms of helping develop and progress the company. We don't pigeonhole anybody and say, oh, you're the accountant, we're going to make you just run the numbers, or you're the project manager. We end up getting involved in each other's efforts and activities. And what we found is those people that want to join our company are those that are interested in oil and gas, either through historical connection, family connection, vested interest in helping the environment and improve. And the very simple fact, I think, that we're kind of a forefront in terms of pushing this unique, innovative technologies out into the marketplace. lot of that attracts people that want to be behind something new.
Well, John, I mean, we could go on for another half hour, but we're up on time. I was curious. I read something about Exxon giving up on their project where they had discovered technology to remove carbons from the air, but that's a whole nother conversation for
Right.
another time, I think. But we're encouraged to hear that there's companies that are actually making an effort to reduce the carbon footprint on this planet in every way possible. I mean, oil and gas isn't going away tomorrow, but at least we have technologies that can help reduce those impacts. Thanks for joining us today. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Just stay with us as we go off the air. Want to remind everyone Monday to come back for the recap show. We're going to recap 4 shows. We had 4 shows this week. We'll do it in 10 minutes. And then just another reminder that as of January, the 1 p.m. Dojo Live show will begin at 12 noon Pacific. It'll be starting at 12 noon Pacific. The 10 a.m. show on Wednesday will continue at 10 a.m. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and please stay safe.
What about next week, Tulio? You're forgetting that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're up on next week. What do we got coming up next week?
Yeah, we only have two shows, well, at least with
I'm
me
already in the holiday mood.
Participating, Tulio. Yeah. Aren't we all, Tulio? So, yeah, actually, next week we only have 2 shows unless a third one is confirmed with Ram. But as far as I'm concerned, we have 2 shows. The first one on Tuesday at 1 p.m. It's going to be with the one of the principals. I think he is the CEO, David Bradford, of a platform called Freight Waves, a platform that deals with supply chain and logistics and a number of other related items. And then finally, the last interview of the year is going to be with none other than VMware, by the way. And he's Ryan Jones, the product lead and manager at VMware. And I have the topic for that one, is to determine a valuable product without building one. I personally look forward to that one. So stop wasting your time and money. Quickly determine value and the fastest way to market. So that's what we have next week, Tulio and John. Please join us.
Gentlemen.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Stay safe, everyone.